Good evening, everybody. Hell's Unicorn here once again, and tonight I just wanted to do a little talk about this. I want to call this basically a hysteria for the gold standard. Now, as many of you have known for the better part of the 3 years that I've been posting videos on here, I am a supporter of the, in principle, with the concept of the gold standard because I think that money is best useful when it is kept constant and not when it's regularly attacked by inflationary multiplication of the supply, so to speak. I don't think it's a good idea for people to just simply print money, and print money. Because the more money you print, the less likely it is that this money is going to be distributed equitably by the government to all needed industries in order to create the desired economic effect. Coupled with this, the fact that I am basically 100% convinced that there is no way whatsoever that any government can even begin to comprehend the way in which a massive economy like ours, let alone a smaller one in some smaller country, would work as a whole and would be able to designate such monies in order to provide what would actually be a beneficial stimulus. I think the very concept of government stimulus is in and of itself misleading and should be replaced with terms such as government shot in the dark fiscal policy, or government random machine gun fire at a target in hopes of hitting something with a bullseye on it. Those would be probably a much more accurate depiction of what usually tends to go on. Or if you want to get really accurate, you could say government cronyism under the guise of helping the economy. But as much as I like the concept of a gold standard because it prevents all of this nonsense that can go on with inflation and deflation, and it basically gives you a constant standard of value from which to work with, there is a problem with the mentality that a lot of people on my side of the of things tend to have with regards to this. They seem to view the notion of a national gold standard as a fix-all with regards to economic policy. And the truth is it just doesn't work that way completely. You can have the most stable currency in the world, but the truth is that it's all for naught if you're not actually producing something in order to sustain your society. You can't eat gold. You can't fashion clothing out of gold. You cannot build houses out of gold to shelter all the people. You cannot build roads out of gold. You cannot build fires out of gold. All of the necessities that the human race requires in order to sustain itself does not come from the substance of gold. It comes from the activity of human beings, human acts, to use the term of Ludwig von Mises. And as such, I tend to favor the Ron Paul view of a commodity-based economy as opposed to a national gold standard. I don't actually believe in the concept of a nationally regulated gold standard for a couple of reasons, not the least of which is that even gold itself can be vulnerable to a certain form of inflationary degradation of value if you simply alter the standard, if you make less gold equal to the equivalent currency that you use as a receipt for it. And even still, if we were to find large deposits of gold and add them to our treasury, we have the problem that we're not necessarily creating new commodities, no new goods and services to match this newfound supply. So there are limitations to how much a gold standard can actually fix the problem of currency degradation and of inflation and deflation, as it were. The truth is that the reason why limited government is preferable to overactive government is because it allows industry to properly allocate everything that it needs to all of the necessary sectors. The people at large are much more capable of determining where these goods and services need to go than any group of elite thinkers. The whole notion that we can have a Federal Reserve Bank that's simply run by a master computer with a bunch of statistics being regurgitated, as some have suggested in the Chicago School of Economics, is heavily problematic in this regard because, who runs the computer, and if indeed nobody is running the computer, how is a dumb machine going to tell us where everything needs to go? How are you going to program such a machine to anticipate the unpredictable actions of people, the unpredictable wants and desires of people? It's sheer lunacy, and this is one of the reasons why I'm heavily critical of the Chicago School in this regard. The truth is that what ultimately separates the Chicago way of thinking from the Austrian way of thinking, and why I actually sort of go back and forth between the two, is the fact that Chicago-style economics has a small measure of faith in the idea of a government-regulated economy, whereas the Austrian school doesn't deal in that sort of faith. Me, myself, I tend to sort of go down the middle on this. I think that there are some specific aspects in which a state is required, specifically with regards to enforcement of a social contract, as it were. Now, I tend to lean a little bit more towards Locke than Hobbes as far as how this is implemented and what it's supposed to do. But generally speaking, you do need an enforcement body in order to accomplish this, and this is essentially where the state comes in. Now, the thing that needs to be kept in mind is that the state is not supposed to be above everybody else that is in society, and thus there are certain things that the state must not be permitted to do, and one of those things which it must absolutely not be permitted to do is to interfere with the economic system which it is presiding over. It is there only to enforce those mechanisms which are inherent in the social contract. There are certain rules that need to be followed in order for liberty to prevail within the market. We cannot allow ourselves to be the victims of the prudent predators who constantly barrage us with their fraudulent activities, and we obviously don't want to get stuck up by a bunch of thieves and armed robbers every time that we become prosperous. So at the heart of this entire little rant that I've done here is this. When dealing with issues such as currency stability, as with anything else, it's always a good idea to just essentially keep an open mind with regards to the nuances in these things, because more often than not, these things aren't as cut and dry as you would think they are. And specifically with the issue of gold. I mean, gold is good. I'll just say that right now. It's good. It's durable, it's reliable, and it's scarce, so it does make a good standard for a currency to use as a medium of exchange. However, it's not foolproof. Nothing is really foolproof when you think of it. The right kind of fool can ruin just about any kind of system. We're not in the idea of creating a foolproof system. That's essentially the building blocks for a utopian outlook, and we all know well what that leads to. So anyway, it's just a good idea to pay attention to all of the details and to not rush to one singular judgment until you have all of the variables accounted for and all of the constants considered. Until next time, with prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.